It was supposed to be just one day, one simple, harmless favor that would help her get through an awkward family reunion. Nothing more, nothing less. But fate has a strange way of taking the smallest choices and turning them into life-changing moments. Grace Bennett stood outside the old family farmhouse in rural Oregon, her heart pounding in her chest as she scrolled through her contacts, hovering over one name she barely knew. She'd met him only twice, once at a local coffee shop, once at the auto garage when her car broke down in the middle of nowhere. His name was Ethan Cole, a quiet mechanic with kind eyes and a steady voice that made her feel safe. And now, in a desperate moment, he was her only option. Grace needed someone to play her boyfriend, just for a day, so her family would finally stop pitying her, stop asking why she was always alone, stop treating her like she was broken after her engagement ended 2 years ago. But that's the thing about pretending. Sometimes it feels too real to ignore. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing emotional, heartfelt stories like this one to life. Grace's heart still ached from the past. Her ex-fiancé, Daniel, had left her 2 weeks before their wedding, saying he wasn't ready for forever. Since then, every family dinner, every Christmas, every phone call from her mother carried the same unspoken question: "When will you find someone again, Grace?" When Ethan's number flashed on her screen, she took a deep breath and pressed call. To her surprise, he didn't hesitate. "If you need help, I'm there," he said, his voice calm and sincere. She explained her situation, a family barbecue where her ex would also be present. She couldn't face another night of whispers and sympathetic looks. Ethan simply replied, "Tell me when to be there." That Saturday afternoon, as sunlight poured through the orchard behind her parents' farmhouse, Grace saw him walking toward her across the field. He wore dark jeans, a clean white shirt rolled at the sleeves, and a soft smile that seemed to quiet the noise inside her. He didn't look like a man pretending to belong in her world. He looked like someone who had always been meant to. When her family saw them together, their reactions were instant. Her mother's eyes lit up. Her father gave a nod of approval, and her sister whispered, "Finally." Ethan took Grace's hand naturally, his thumb brushing against hers just once. A small gesture, but it sent a warmth through her chest she hadn't felt in years. Throughout the day, Ethan played the part perfectly. He laughed with her cousins, helped set the table, and even joined her father in fixing a squeaky gate. Grace couldn't help watching him, not because he was handsome, though he was, but because of how genuine he seemed. Every smile, every glance, every word felt real. He didn't overplay the role, he just was. But what Grace didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Ethan wasn't just a mechanic. He had inherited a small automotive company from his father, one that had quietly grown into a multi-million-dollar business. After losing his parents in a car accident 5 years earlier, Ethan had stepped away from corporate life, choosing to live simply, working at his own repair shop and trying to find peace. He didn't tell anyone about his wealth or status anymore. He'd learned that money made people act differently. Grace didn't recognize his name from the business world, and he preferred it that way. As the sun dipped lower and the light turned golden, Grace found herself standing near the old barn, the air filled with the smell of roses and barbecue smoke. Ethan walked up beside her, leaning slightly against the fence. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her throat felt tight. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending to be fine. She actually... Later that evening, as everyone gathered for dessert, Daniel arrived, late as always. Grace's heart stuttered when she saw him. He smiled his familiar, charming smile, walking straight toward her like nothing had ever happened. "Grace," he said, his tone smooth but hollow, "you look great." Before she could respond, Ethan stepped forward and gently placed his arm around her shoulders. "She always does," he said, smiling. "I'm lucky." The words were simple, but the way he said them, steady, protective, sincere, left Daniel momentarily speechless. The rest of the night passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Ethan never once made Grace feel like she owed him anything. He wasn't performing, he was present. When the night ended and the last car taillights disappeared down the long gravel driveway, Grace turned to thank him. But before she could speak, Ethan said, "You don't have to thank me, I had a good time." His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something there, something real. Then he smiled faintly, nodded, and drove away. In the days that followed, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. The house felt quieter, emptier somehow. She told herself it was silly, that what she felt wasn't real, that she'd just been swept up in the moment. But every time she passed the cafe where they'd first met, her heart tugged. 2 weeks later, she stopped by Ethan's garage to return the watch he'd accidentally left at her parents' house. The place smelled of oil and cedar, sunlight filtering through dusty windows. He looked surprised but happy to see her. They talked for a while, about family, work, small things, until Grace finally said what had been sitting on her chest. "You didn't have to do what you did that day," she said quietly, "but you made me feel like I mattered again." Ethan smiled softly. "You always mattered, Grace. You just forgot for a while." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, and maybe, just maybe, she did. Over the next few months, their paths began to cross more often, sometimes by accident, sometimes because one of them found an excuse. She'd bring him coffee on cold mornings. He'd help her fix things around her house. Slowly, the line between pretend and real began to blur. Grace felt herself coming alive again, laughing freely, painting again, and daring to dream of a future she'd stopped believing in. But when she learned the truth about Ethan, that he wasn't just a mechanic but the owner of an entire company, the fragile world she'd started to build began to crack. She found out through an article shared online by her sister. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, another man with the same name, but the photo proved otherwise. She felt betrayed, confused, and foolish. She went to see him that evening, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Ethan was standing outside the garage, locking up for the night when she arrived. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "All this time, you let me think you were just a mechanic?" He finished gently. "Grace, that's all I wanted to be with you. I didn't want to be the CEO or the man people wanted something from. I just wanted to be myself. The guy who fixed your car and made you laugh." Tears stung her eyes. "You should have trusted me with the truth." He nodded slowly. "You're right, I should have. But you're the first person who ever looked at me without seeing a dollar sign. I didn't want to lose that." Grace turned away, torn between pain and understanding. She left without another word, driving into the night as rain began to fall, blurring the world into streaks of silver and light. Weeks passed. She tried to move on, but the emptiness only grew. She missed his quiet strength, his laugh, the way he made her believe she could start over. One evening, she returned to her parents' farm to help her mother in the garden. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she looked up and saw Ethan's truck pulling into the driveway. He got out, holding a small bouquet of lavender, the same flowers from her dress that first day. "I came to say goodbye," he said softly. "I'm moving to Seattle to expand the business, but before I go, I needed you to know I didn't fake a single moment with you." Grace stood silent, her heart in her throat. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "You wanted pretend love," he whispered. "But what I felt was real." Something inside her broke open, not from pain this time, but from hope. She realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about honesty, courage, and finding someone who saw you, truly saw you, even when you couldn't see yourself. She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and looked into his eyes. "Then don't say goodbye," she said softly. "Say you'll stay." Ethan hesitated, then smiled, that quiet, familiar smile that had changed everything from the start. He dropped the bouquet, pulled her into his arms, and held her like someone who had finally come home. The golden light of the setting sun spilled over them, wrapping the world in warmth. For the first time, Grace felt whole, not because someone loved her, but because she had finally learned to love again. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing these heartfelt stories to life. Special request, comment below. Do you believe that sometimes pretend love can lead to something truly real? And maybe, just maybe, like Grace and Ethan, you'll find that the love meant for you was never pretend at all.